Hi, my name is Donnie Hollingsworth. I am an art and English instructor at Lamar Community College in Southeast Colorado. I gave a presentation some years ago about the role of academia in the search for truth. Uh, Dr. Frankel and I gave it to this school pretty much through Zoom. It was through the pandemic years. So I've just kept it. I thought it was a good presentation and thought I would just share it with everyone here, everyone that's clicked on the video. So in this presentation, I will be shuffling papers, things like this, so not to be too distracted. Okay. In this presentation, I will at times be using the words truth, reality, knowledge, and meaning interchangeably. One of the operative words in that lecture series was truth. I offer the signification of truth, what it signifies. In other words, not as motionless, but as the shape of a creek, as the flight of air, the flow of water. So what is truth? The preface is any discussion of reality or truth will deal with definitions. And as we define, we reduce to sounds and words something, life, which is entirely not made out of words. We never see words hanging from trees, things like this. So with this attempted honesty in mind, we have to admit that as we talk about the truth, we reduce it. All that we call knowledge is a kind of reduction. On the other hand, the rational mind might have a special relationship to reality and truth through words. After all, words themselves, and with an implicit search for truth, from Odin's runes to the Kabbalistic origin of the Hebrew letters, have mystical beginnings. The Sefer Yetzirah states clearly that God created the universe with Hebrew letters. The Sefer Yetzirah is one of the earliest Kabbalistic books we have. So these Hebrew letters, these first lines begin to set up the complicated relation of language to reality. On one level, divine language is ultimately reality. Creation takes place through Hebrew letters. The first recorded people who possessed truth were mystics and shamans. The Yakawai Indians, for instance, Peyote, believed that true knowledge comes about from being aware of all the unseen realities that surround us every day. Books like Carlos Castaneda, A Separate Reality, describes it well. With that said, here we have the Merriam-Webster definition. The real facts about something, the things that are true. Are you telling me the truth? At some point you have to face the simple, hard, honest, plain, naked truth that we failed. Their explanation was simpler but came closer to the truth. So, what is truth? I prefer the word veritas, from which we get the word verity, which means truth. Like the Sophia of the Gnostics, she was personified as a goddess at the end of the ancient world. Veritas, folks. But the Merriam-Webster definition doesn't account for layers of complexity. It may be a linguistic inconvenience. We have a main verb for lying, but not telling the truth. There isn't a truthing, for instance. So telling the truth may be more complicated. It could be that truth is like what Nietzsche said about good and evil, that it merely hints but never defines. Truth, like beauty, doesn't have a stable absolute fact. It is, like Derrida said, words do not have meaning, they have a trajectory. There's the man himself, Derrida. What a great picture. Derrida's ideas can be of interest to us here. For the truth to be revealed in Derrida's schema, called deconstructionism, the logocentric dominating center of discourse becomes replaced by the marginalized story. Now, this is what deconstructionism really means. I've noticed in the past 15 years, 20 years that people use the word deconstruction as a fancy way of saying destroying or taking apart. That's not what it means. This is what it means. It means when we have the logocentric, that binary lock conversation, and we move it, we dislocate that monotheistic monad oneness to the side, and we let the marginalized conversation narrate the story. This process deliberately traces meaning and truth from the author to the text to the reader. After a period of time, meaning falls apart and you're left with hollow idols, like empty statues that once held meaning. Or as Nietzsche put it, a reevaluation of values. 2, the deconstructionist language is uncentered. We cannot perfectly communicate what we mean with language. Language is a continually modified, nebulous activity that has no finalities. Any truth expressed through language will also have these characteristics: an unsaid or implied central meaning that dominates the conversation. In this model, truth never exists. It is a continuous process of coming to be, just like Whitehead's God. We can see deconstructionism at work in memes. And what does it mean when a meme replaces language, when the image replaces a definition? Although there's usually some text that goes along with the picture on a meme, most memes defy literary or critical analysis. The meaning is often implied, implicated. In other words, it is a trajectory of meaning. There isn't a more blatant form of newspeak, which is an Orwellian term, than in the meme. Quote, and a meme is an ambiguous, euphemistic language used chiefly in political propaganda. At least it was in the 2020 election. So think of an image of Marx or Ayn Rand. Without any words, we would still have a feeling of the intention, but we move further and further away from certainty and definiteness. Lastly, 2 things should be kept in mind when we are thinking about memes. A, the first images or memes can be found on cave walls, telling the truth of the deer, the shaman, the hunt. And B, the farther away we move from text-based information, the more we have historical amnesia. Another example of deconstructionism of truth and meaning is the word bad. In the late 70s and early 80s, when I came into consciousness in the 80s, that word bad had grown into a natural deconstructionist state. Being bad was actually being good, such as I grew up hearing is, hey man, that's bad. And we could go on a list of slang words that mean something entirely different from the original meaning, such as dope and fat. So once Derrida was asked if America had any deconstructionism, he replied, America is deconstructionism, meaning that we are always trying to move the logocentric monastic monism into direct confrontation to the marginalized voices through protests, revolts, from the American Revolution, Black Lives Matter, and even the storming of the Capitol. It's all part of America's deconstructionism. So the objective world is eroding. There's good news here. Or it's deconstructing itself without ever reverting back to its formal shape. Simulacrum is a word championed by Baudrillard, and it's in the culture. Let's see how we can do with this. Simulacrum. A culture that self-destructs and recreates itself. This is what we're dealing with. Its exhausted simulacrum as reality, and with it truth, recedes farther and farther away. For example, chocolate potato chips. The relationship between what's symbolized and what's supposed to represent breaks down. Words have a special relationship to thinking. Our consciousness is determined by the tone and stance of the inner narrative, by the rhetorical stance, if you will. And our culture, thought habits, and language all rise together in our thinking, in our truth. One of the results is a stylized version of reality, of truth, not unlike what we had in the Middle Ages. The medieval mindset is typified by bias coercion, which is essentially having a theory first and then finding evidence that fits within those blinders, those parameters of that theory. This is the exact opposite of the scientific method and turns truth into mythology. From flat earthers to QAnon, we see a resurgence of a kind of Gnostic movement in the sense that there is a belief in a secret kind of knowledge. And this knowledge has to do with connecting events and people in a kind of scavenger hunt for the truth. Whether we like it or not, the medieval mindset isn't going anywhere. What are the virtues of the medieval mindset? We can look to Goethe's Faust, at least his version of it. In the story, Faust learns magic so that he can conjure a devil named Mephistopheles. Faust is then awarded hidden knowledge and forbidden carnality in exchange for his soul. Although the story is based on an actual figure named Johann George Faust, if I mispronounce that, I apologize. There is evidence to point to Theophilus in the 13th century. Faust's basic medieval ambition is to expand knowledge and pleasure, the very things that we today are still seeking through both the university and capitalism. We might say, well, he sold his soul, but isn't that the very foundation of our American dream? To sign away one's name through loans, ever-expanding debt for the sake of knowledge, pleasure, or power. We make Faustian pacts every day. We don't blink an eye. Of course, when we bring up the Dark Ages, it makes sense to lift our spirits with the Renaissance, where the medieval period championed a stylized version of truth, of reality. The Renaissance gave us a rebirth of proportion, perspective, and 200 years later, the scientific method. Before the 17th century, the West hadn't had a proper scientist since Aristotle. Truth can, indeed, in a dogmatic, fearful, superstitious atmosphere, turn sterile and become inert. Unchecked dogmatic fascism, whether from the state or a theocracy, will burn truth at the stake every time. The core of the Renaissance of this rebirth was the rediscovery of the classic philosophers, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Strangely enough, it was the Middle East that had kept the classics intact as the West went through the throes of how many angels would fit on the head of a pin and other fascinating thought questions. But we have to remember truth was not so much cut and dry in the ancient world. Socrates refused to write anything down, but his friend and student Plato, focused on universal truths, his theory of forms, while Aristotle found those truths in the natural world. We can see this in this depiction of Raphael's School of Athens. Plato is on the left, pointing towards the heavens, the world of forms, while Aristotle is shown pointing towards the earth and the viewer. In some way, we could say that Nietzsche was correct in him saying in his quote, well, when he says that Christianity is Platonism for the masses, it really has all the framework set up for that Hellenistic core. So, I should give a quick explanation of what I mean by Plato's theories of forms. There's a famous story called the Allegory of the Cave. So, Plato's allegory of the cave is a concept devised by this philosopher to ruminate on the nature of belief versus knowledge. The allegory states that there exist prisoners chained together in a cave. Behind the prisoners is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners are people carrying puppets or other objects. This casts a shadow on the other side of the wall. The prisoners watch these shadows, believing them to be real. Plato posits that one prisoner could become free. He finally sees the fire and realizes the shadows are fake. The prisoner could escape from the cave and discover there's a whole new world outside that he was previously unaware of. The prisoner would believe the outside world was so much more real than what was in the cave. He would try to return to free the other prisoners. Upon his return, he is blinded because his eyes are not accustomed to actual sunlight, like walking into a dark theater trying to find your friends when you've been out in the sun. The chained prisoners would see this blindness and believe they will be harmed if they try to leave the cave. And then we have Plato's line of simile. As we move from mere imaginings, we enter opinion, knowledge, and finally wisdom. We go from mere imaginings to common sense belief to discursive reasoning, which means we have a dialogue. It is at this point that the person is living with the universals. They walk in truth with the forms. The forms are universal. Start out being what will be true here will be true in Carthage, in Egypt, etc. It will be universally true. What's universally true? This is what Plato was concerned with. What has verifiability or veritas in all the places? In other words, it will have objective truth. Getting back to this objective world, this world of universal truth has always benefited the West. The people whom we call the Founding Fathers owe a great deal to Enlightenment philosophy and were well read in the classics. It could be said that in America there are two streams of thought when it comes to truth: the puritanical, predestined fatalism, and the Enlightenment thinkers whose truth is found in free will, in liberty, and choices. Benjamin Franklin's God, who helps those who help themselves, whereas the Puritan sees devils everywhere and finds truth through fear. The Enlightenment thinkers form a nation and find truth through curiosity. So, what is the role of education in the search for truth? When we are speaking about education in this context, it's good to keep in mind that what we are actually asking is, what is the role of academia or academics in the search for truth? The word academia comes from Plato's school called the Academy. It's only because we live in a culture cut off from its cultural roots, from the heritage bestowed on us by Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, that we would have to ask and answer this question in the first place. For instance, in England, they teach a love of the classics, a love of the ancient world and philosophy. It's because, as Asimov pointed out, we live in a nation where part of the culture actually fosters ignorance that grows. It's like a garden. As a garden of ignorance grows, fear adopts superstition instead of critical analysis. Ideologues, who are the new sophists, prevail. This may sound harsh, what Isaac Asimov is saying here, but isn't this really just an echo of one of Socrates' famous maxims? Plato faced this problem. It was the proud and ignorant who actually killed his teacher and dear friend Socrates. He knew all too well what was at stake, what has always been at stake. At the time of this writing, some years ago, And this, at the time of the writing, Florida was considering new legislation that would allow students to record their instructors, whether the instructors liked it or not, so that the students could sue them if the professors say something they didn't like. The culture at large has a misunderstanding of what actually goes on in a college or university. What is the role of truth in the university in the universal sense? Again, we are faced with the same question that caught Socrates in the Pre-Socratics. In a university setting, we are talking about the 7 liberal arts: astronomy, mathematics, geometry, music, from the time of Pythagoras, coupled after the 9th century with the humanities of grammar, rhetoric, and logic. We need to keep in mind that these liberal or free arts, not fine arts, but the art of mastering a technique, is what frees us of the shadows of the mere imaginings in Plato's cave. The role of this type of education in the search for truth means being a universally free person, skilled in critical thinking and a self-examining life. And finally, it can be said that in college, we can explain the Industrial Revolution and why Marxism or the rights of the workers would make sense in an assembly line setting, how a free market gave us a unique advantage, and how capitalism just by itself gave us the Great Depression. We can explain and speak about George Washington as a great military leader, as someone who spent the last years of his life chasing runaway slaves. In short, the university, the college, is a place where we can tell the truth.